Welcome back to the Jacob Hornberger Show. Nice to be back with y'all. I'm president of the Future of Freedom Foundation. We're on the web at www.fff.org. Sorry I missed y'all last week, and I was speaking at a conference in Philadelphia sponsored by the Students for Liberty. Great group. I mean, there's no better high for a libertarian than preaching to the choir, especially when the choir is a bunch of young people who have fire in the belly for libertarianism and free market economics. And gosh, it was just great. I mean, there was like about 150, 170 kids in the audience, and man, you can just feel the energy. It's really a high for a speaker, especially a libertarian speaker. So that's where I was. I was up in Philly sharing ideas on liberty and getting ideas on liberty too, as I consider myself a student of liberty. Nice to be back with you guys. I want to talk to you tonight about a diverse selection of things that are in the news, insider trading, the Detroit bomber plea, the plea of guilty. A little bit about the political race in especially in the Republican Party, and maybe if we have some time, talk about what's going on in Egypt. May let you go early this evening. We'll see how things go. Uh, but first thing, there was this insider trading case, where the judge just sent up some guy for, I don't know, 11 years, and another guy for 2 years. He's got a wife and a couple of kids. And what's really ridiculous is when you see the judge, this federal judge just sitting up there, and I don't remember what his exact words were, but the news media reported him saying something like, "This is a very grave crime, very serious crime." I mean, what a crock that is. It's 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 not even a grave crime. It's not a serious crime. It's a stupid crime. It's an idiotic crime. But the problem is these judges are just like anyone else. They're stuck in the statist mindset. They're all a little bunch of little statists that grew up with all this statism around them, and so they look at this thing and say, "Oh my gosh, what a grave crime!" It's ridiculous. Um, I mean, it's the same type of ridiculousness that you find in North Korea or Red China or whatever. They got economic crimes there too. Vietnam, I mean that's one of the hallmarks of a socialist communist country is economic crimes. Like price controls. I mean, I guarantee you, if your standard federal judge were serving in China or North Korea and somebody was brought up on charges that he had charged too much money in violation of the price control of the state, I guarantee you these federal judges would look there with a big, feeling of gravitas, and they'd look down at the defendant and say, "This is a very serious crime. This is a very grave crime." Well, it's an idiotic crime, Judge. It's a stupid crime. You just can't see it because I'm sure you went to public schools, government schools. You went to, a state-supported college or university. You went to a state-supported law school, licensed by the state, and of course appointed by a statist, whether it was, a Democrat or Republican. Most of them are statists, and so, you're not going to get any libertarians, with some exceptions. I mean, I know there's been one or two libertarians selected to the federal bench, but it's like, they happen to sneak under the radar screen. I mean, the judges by and large are statists. And so the judge, encounters this insider trading law, and it's like, "Oh, this is so grave. It's stupid. I mean, it's absolutely stupid. It's an economic crime. It's as stupid as any other economic crime. I mean, taking like excess profits. I mean, suppose they made a law against excess profits. Well, I guarantee you that they haul somebody up there for making excess profits. The judge would sit there with that air of gravitas and say, "This is a very serious crime." Well, it's not a serious crime. It's a stupid crime. And all economic crimes are stupid crimes. They're idiotic crimes. I mean, it's just amazing that we have to live. I mean, this is nothing new. These economic crimes go back to the Middle Ages. They go back to the age of mercantilism. In the Middle Ages, they had crimes against speculation. You know how you hear these condemnations of speculators, and they're the cause of the stock market crash, or the problems in Greece and stuff forth. It's the speculators that are out there driving the market down for bonds, government bonds or whatever. They had laws against middlemen. I mean, imagine that. Farmers in the Middle Ages would come in from the fields with their crops, and they would be met out there on the outskirts of town by somebody that was trying to buy their crop and then take it into the downtown market and sell it at a higher price. That was against the law. And, the government officials were just like this federal judge in this insider trading case. They would just look at, these middlemen with gravitas and say, this is a very serious crime. You have bought low and you're selling high. You're exploiting the farmers, exploiting the workers. I mean, it's ridiculous. But they actually, sent people to jail for these kind of things, just like they're doing today. I mean, why can't these things simply be left to the free market? What a person charges, what contracts people enter into, how much profit is made, how much revenues are brought into the firm. Why can't this all be just part of the market process? Really what it involves, and at least the media is pointing this out, that there's no victims in these insider trades. I mean, you don't see a dead person, like a murder case or something like this. You don't have a fraud case where somebody's being defrauded of their money. It's this envy against people doing well, that, oh, well, he has an advantage. Well, duh. I mean, people have advantages in all walks of life. Hollywood actors and actresses, they have an advantage because, like, most of them are really attractive. Just not fair. We need equality. Maybe we ought to, scar those people's faces up or something so that they'll be equal with everybody. A tall person in basketball, he's got an advantage over the rest of us. Duh. I mean, this is the way life is. People find their niche and there's advantages. And yeah, some people do research on stock matters. They have an analytical mind. They're able to figure out things faster than others. And some people just have contacts. They have friends that are serving as presidents of a corporation and so forth. If it's okay with that company to share inside information, then what's wrong with that in a moral sense? I mean, that's up to that company, isn't it? I mean, isn't that what private property is all about? If a private company says, hey, people can trade off our stock, well, then the information that they acquire from here, hey, if the president wants to help his friends out and make them rich, so be it. But that's up to the company. If people don't want to invest in the stock of a company that says, hey, anybody can trade on insider confidential information here, they don't have to buy the stock of that company. They don't have to trade in it. They can boycott it. Or if a company says, no, we're not going to have insider trading and all of our officials here are required to keep things confidential, so be it. If they violate that, they're subject to being sued by the firm. The firm can sue other people that have benefited from the breach of contract. But all of this is just a matter of the market. It's a matter of private property. Don't you just love it when you see, these conservatives saying, we're great believers in free markets. I'm a free enterprise kind of guy. I go to the Chamber of Commerce meeting every week, And then he says, oh, we're so happy that this man got, convicted of insider trading. This is a grave offense. It's a stupid offense. I mean, just leave these things to the market. There's no such thing as, charging too high a price for anything. If it belongs to that person, that's what being an owner is all about. You can charge whatever you want. And if somebody doesn't want to buy, they don't have to buy. I mean, here's another example of this idiocy of economic crimes is the price gouging laws. Now, these judges, on the price gouging laws, they'll do just like this federal judge did. They'll get that serious look on their face and they'll say, you gouged the public during that hurricane. Well, it's stupid. I mean, there's no such thing in a moral sense, in a free market sense, as price gouging. The price is simply a message it's a communication system. The price system is. It tells people something. If you got a hurricane and the price of ice is soared because people can charge whatever they want, that's telling consumers you need to conserve. They don't need a government official to tell them to conserve. They see it in the price. The price, let's say, uh, triples for a bag of ice. That's telling consumers you need to conserve. It's also telling suppliers, hey, supply, you got a chance for a quick profit here. And so people, speculators, entrepreneurs rush into the market to make a quick profit. Therefore, supplies increase, which is what people want. Well, you've got these judges, going after people for price gouging. And then they turn everybody into big little spies, like in Cuba, where they got neighborhood committees, looking at everybody, seeing if they're charging anything for their free apartments and all. Uh, Violating economic crimes. I mean, Cuba's known for its economic crimes, just like this insider trading. And I guarantee you the judges there are the same way, the seriousness. This is a serious crime. Well, it's idiocy. It's absolute idiocy. They're destroying more lives with this thing. They're sending, people that have children that have done nothing wrong in a moral sense except violate regulations. And they violated the regulated society. And we all know that these insider trading laws are a way to go after people that they don't like. I mean, they did that with Joe Nocchio, the CEO at Quest. Remember that when George W. Bush asked the telecoms to violate the law, to monitor their customers and to turn over confidential information to the federal government, everybody knew it was against the law. And of course, everybody went along with it except Nocchio. The other telecoms did. And Nocchio says no. That's, for one thing, it's illegal. I'm not going to violate the law. And two, I'm not going to sell out my customers. I got a contract with my customers. I'm loyal to my customers. I'm not going to snitch on my customers to you and the feds. You want a warrant? Go get a warrant. And of course, they ended up granting immunity to all these lawbreakers. But, that sense of, oh, I have to do what the government tells me to do, because I'm a patriotic little snitch. And so, all these guys broke the law. They got immunized. Not Nocchio. I mean, Joe Nocchio is really a hero for our times. But you know what they did to him? They retaliated. They went after him on an insider trading violation. He's now sitting in a penitentiary. Now, they'll sit there and say, oh, this had nothing to do with Nocchio refusing to play ball and sell out his customers. This had nothing to do with him refusing to do what the other little people did that went along with this illegal, immoral scheme. This is just because we happened to find a violation of insider trading. I mean, that's what's the great about the regulated economy. They can find anything, especially when people are high up. Sarbanes-Oxley, the tax code. I mean, the tax code, if you really want to go after somebody, you can find some violation of the IRS code on their income tax returns. I mean, it's not hard to do. That's the purpose of the regulated economy. It keeps everybody in order. It keeps everybody, in their place. Don't challenge the system at a fundamental level, because we can get you if we want to get you. And that's why it's so dangerous. So they've just destroyed a few more lives, just like they do with other things like the drug war. I mean, look how many lives they've destroyed there. I mean, that thing's been going on for 30 years. I don't know how long this insider trading thing is. I think it's like a couple of decades or something. And it really is rooted in this sense of envy and covetousness that drives the whole welfare state, the whole income tax, the graduated income tax, is that they hate it when people are doing well, when people are making a lot of money. The politicians hate it, the bureaucrats hate it, the statists hate it. It's that sense of envy and covetousness, and it manifests itself with economic crimes. So it's not a surprise that the economic crimes is a hallmark of places like Cuba and North Korea and Red China, and, well, probably to a lesser extent China, because they've been liberalizing their economy. But I guarantee you all these things exist in China, in Cuba and North Korea. I mean, the economic crimes is their hallmark. And of course, we're riddled with them too. So, surprise, surprise. Along these lines, it's interesting to watch, or I should say, amusing to watch these Republican presidential candidates. About the jobs. Which one's going to be the big jobs creator? I mean, gosh, do you ever wonder, how idiotic all this is? I mean, how it can be so idiotic with intelligent people that, hey, I'm going to be a bigger job creator than my opponent, and Obama, he's a horrible job creator, and I'm going to be the big job creator, the super job creator. And I mean, of course, you don't hear this nonsense from Ron Paul or Gary Johnson. I mean, they're libertarians, duh. But from the other guys, I mean, it's this. Do you ever get a sense it's just like, musical chairs? So the Democrats in office, and so the Republicans immediately go on the attack. He's a bad manager of the economy. He's a horrible manager of the economy, and he's not creating enough jobs. Okay, so then people get, people say, yeah, that's right. The Republicans are better managers of the economy. They know how to create jobs. So they put a Republican in. Okay, and so the Republican stays there 8 years. And so at the end of it, guess what the Democrats say? Oh, look what they've done with the economy. Yeah, they're just horrible. They've mismanaged the economy. They got debt soaring and spending soaring and inflation and people forget, you see, so they say, oh, they're right. The Democrats are better managers of the economy. The Democrats really know how to create jobs. And so they put Obama in, and so now the Republicans are, it's just a sense of musical chairs. It's idiocy. I mean, have you ever seen so much idiocy in all your life? Insider trading, managing the economy, which job creator? Why don't we find headhunters, and just put them in office? I mean, they know how to find jobs, for people. I mean, they can be the presidential headhunter, now serving as president. I mean, it's such idiocy. And it's all with this mindset of the central planner, that all we need is the right guy at the top, and he's going to centrally manage the economy. He's going to know how to bring jobs to America. I mean, isn't central planning what the Soviet Union was all about? I mean, isn't that why socialism craters? Isn't that why people kept saying socialism cannot succeed? Because you've got the central planning system, where you've got a guy at the top or a bureaucrat or a commission or whatever that's planning in a top-down command and control fashion economic activity. I mean, as compared to the spontaneous order where people are planning their own economic activities and somehow or another coordinating those activities with others. I mean, the great essay on this was by Frederick Bastiat, the great French free market economist. If you haven't read Bastiat, I mean, you got to read Bastiat. I mean, he's absolutely fantastic. Start with his little book, The Law, and then go to economic sophisms and economic natural harmonies. And I mean, he's just absolutely fantastic. But Bastiat talks about, all of these fallacies of, that these central planners, bring to the forefront. I mean, imagine, Bastiat talks about how does Paris get fed? And, he says, isn't it remarkable that all this food comes into Paris every day? I mean, you can talk about your city, wherever you live, that food comes in to the grocery store. And you walk into the grocery store and it's like, whoa. I mean, we all take it for granted, but think about it. There's no government official planning that. There's nobody saying, okay, well, we're going to have this much go to, this grocery store, and we're going to have this much go to this grocery store, of each item. I mean, imagine if a government commission were planning all that. I mean, there'd be planned chaos, as Ludwig von Mises put it. And yet the market does that, and all of a sudden the consumer benefits. He walks into one grocery store or another grocery store, and everything's filled, fruits and vegetables. I mean, how did this happen, in the middle of the night? I mean, it's incredible. And no government planning. And don't get nervous, man. If you're a statist, I mean, you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, all this happens without a central government planner. Man, we better do something to get the government planning this thing. Well, see, that's how the spontaneous order works. It's the way it should work all across the board. But you've got these statists running for office saying, I want to be the central manager of the whole economy. Well, they don't understand that the reason that we're having so many economic problems is because of this concept of socialist central planning. Whether you've got it in the welfare business, where the government's planning the welfare of everybody, or national income, where they tax you, I don't know, a third of your income or whatever, and then they decide what to do with all this money, redistribute it, put it in the pockets of some favored people there on Wall Street, the bailouts, or the bail out their little buddies in the banking business, and or foreign dictators, they got a lot of buddies there too, and then you've got the Federal Reserve planning the amount of money in the system, and boy, should they inflate, should they deflate, should they keep it the same? You've got this whole thing that's centrally managed, the welfare state, and you know, is it any surprise that it's such a mess? I mean, this is what Mises and Hayek and Friedman and the free market economists have said for decades, that this centrally planned system, this welfare state system, the regulated economy, it's going to produce chaos, crises. You see that in the housing industry, and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, government-created agencies. You got the Federal Reserve artificially lowering interest rates to create this bubble, and then what's their answer to it? Oh, well, elect me because I'm going to manage this system better. Hey, dudes, the problem is that you've got a system where you've got the power to manage the system. You see, what we've got to be thinking of is what we libertarians have been saying for decades. Get rid of a managed economy. Have a total free market, a separation of economy and the state. You know how we don't let, government officials get involved in your church affairs and religious activity? I mean, we don't have government officials going into churches as government officials and planning the church activities. I mean, they may do so on a private basis. They may participate, but there's no, department of churches or department of religion, right? I mean, everything just happens spontaneously. People decide which church to go to or not to go to, or they decide what activities they're going to do. Everything seems to work out harmoniously. There's no big gunfights, over religion anymore. There's no battles and civil wars. Well, that's because we separated state and church. Okay, so the state isn't managing the church. You don't see government officials, these guys running for president saying, well, I'm going to be a better manager of the churches and religion than this guy. Well, no, it's because we kind of know that we don't want the government managing religion. Well, what we need to do is extend that reasoning over to the economy, economic activity. We don't want these people managing economic activity. We want a way of life, at least we libertarians do, where everybody's managing his own life. Isn't that what freedom's all about, is managing your own life? Now, you may make mistakes. You may do things that other people disapprove of. You may not save for your retirement. You may go out and drink booze or smoke dope, and you may go out and do dangerous activities, skydive or climb, Mount Everest or whatever. But that's what managing your own life is all about, and it's the right to make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes, and but that's the trouble with this managed economy. They want to manage everybody's life, and that system is what's causing America's economic woes. I mean, it's the welfare state, it's the managed economy, and it's the warfare state too. And we'll talk maybe a little bit about that too tonight. But it's this statist concept of managing the economy, regulating the economy, sending people to jail for insider trading laws or price gouging or excess profits. It's inane. That really what we need to be doing is talking about separating the economy and the state. No more manager. I mean, imagine, what are they going to talk about there at those debates when they can't say, hey, I'm going to produce jobs? You don't have the power to produce jobs under the libertarian paradigm any more than you have the power to produce jobs in the religion sector. Well, I'm going to manage the economy better than Obama, you know. Well, no, you're not going to manage anything, and not as a government official. Well, maybe you can manage, you know, the employees in your office in the White House, but you're not going to manage the private sector because we're going to separate economy and the state the way we separate church and state. I mean, that's the libertarian paradigm. I mean, that's the solution to the economic woes. Now, notice that they always blame the free market, you know, the banksters, you know, or Wall Street. Well, okay, there's a certain amount of truth to that because there's this what we call crony capitalism, where the people on Wall Street and in the banking industry are in bed with the politicians, and it's scratch your back, scratch my back, and when I, you know, make a bad investment decision, get the taxpayer money, replenish my supplies of cash so that I don't take a hit on this thing. And then, you know, they always get control of the regulatory commissions. That's in order to keep out competition. So yeah, there's no doubt that there's this cronyism that takes place. There's this partnership between business and the state. I mean, it's fascism. I mean, that's really what Mussolini's system was about, the government-business partnerships, the combination of business and the state, you know, the cronyism, that, you know, bailouts and so forth. But you know, the trouble with liberals is they go much deeper in that. They criticize. They say that the real reason that there's such bad economic times is because too much freedom in society, too much free enterprise. In other words, that part of society that they still don't have under control or management or regulation, they say that's the problem. Well, of course, you know, I mean, it's like anything else. You go to a doctor, if you get a wrong diagnosis, you're going to get a wrong prescription. And that's a wrong diagnosis. You know, the problem is not that people are too free. The problem is that people are too controlled and too regulated. And you know, they got their money being taken from them to fund all this welfareism, including to these foreign dictators. And you've got this warfare state, you know, sucking giant amounts of money and capital. You got out of control spending, debt, you know, inflation's getting cranked up. That's the problem. The problem is these paradigms, the welfare state paradigm, the regulated economy paradigm, the military warfare empire paradigm. And you know, we've all grown up in these things, and so the natural attitude is to consider things the same way the Russian people did with the Soviet Union. You know, when you know, everything there was centrally planned. You know, like let's say the manufacture and distribution and sale of shoes. I mean, the state produced the shoes, and people had grown up this way. And so if you went to them and you said, hey, you know, let's put the shoe industry just in private hands, I mean, people would freak out. I mean, you know, how would this work? I mean, are you kidding me? I mean, how would private producers know how many shoes to produce? How would they know what sizes and the right number of shoes in each size? And what about the colors? And I mean, no, you need to have a manager do this, you know, a state manager. Well, of course, you know, the products were shoddy, and the people were abusive that were selling these things. But you know, the average person, you'd say, look, if you turn it over to the free market, man, it'll be fantastic. You know, that you'll have better shoes, more quality shoes. People will be nice to you in the marketplace. They want your business. And oh no, it was like, oh my gosh, no, you know, we grew up with this system. Well, it's the same thing here in the United States. We all were born and raised in a welfare state, right? I mean, the number of people that were born before 1930, or, you know, not very many, if there's any left. You know, that was the big socialist revolution under Franklin Roosevelt. And then, you know, a warfare state, the national security state, the CIA, the FBI, the military-industrial complex, the empire overseas. We've all been born and raised in it. And so when you bring up the idea of, you know, like dismantling this whole thing, oh my gosh, oh, Jacob, you know, oh, the terrorists will come and take over America and run the public schools. They'll be the federal judges, you know, terrorists up on the federal bench, you know. And I mean, because we've all been born and raised under statism, you know, it's difficult to imagine what life's like without a managed economy, without the president producing jobs for people, without this huge military empire that's making trouble overseas that then is used as the excuse to take away our freedoms at home. But that's what we need to do. You know, if you've got cancer, let's say, and you go to the doctor, and if the doctor misdiagnoses and says, well, you got an upset stomach, he's going to give you a medicine that's not going to do very good for the cancer. He's going to give you like Pepto-Bismol or something because he's misdiagnosed the problem. Now, if he diagnoses it correctly, he says, I think we can remove this tumor from you. It's cancerous. It's going to kill you. And you say, well, what other alternative do we have? And he says, well, we can reform it. We can modify it. We can cut a little bit here, reduce a little bit here. Well, some people might go that route. Say, oh, okay, well, I'm kind of dependent on the cancer tumor there, and it's been there quite a while. I'm kind of dependent on it, and so, yeah, doctor, let's reform it a little bit, and let's modify it, and just polish it up a little bit. Well, ridiculous, right? Okay, that's what you're saying. Jacob, that's ridiculous. I want that cancer out of me. I want that tumor out. Doctor, cut the whole thing out and take it out, right? I mean, it's a smart thing to do. It depends on the right diagnosis. That's what I'm saying about this welfare state, warfare state managed economy. It's like a cancer. It's destroying our country. You've got, the moral debauchery, of course. It's just wrong for them to be doing this, managing an economy, invading countries, assassinating people, torturing people. It's just wrong. But it's also just out of control spending to finance all this monstrosity, both on the welfare state and the warfare state side. It's taken our country down to bankruptcy. I mean, let me give you an example of this Obamacare, okay? I mean, you see conservatives doing this, oh, we're fighting Obamacare, man. We're putting all our energy into Obamacare, and boy, we want it repealed, and by golly, we're fighting it in the courts, and we got a good chance in the Supreme Court, and let's count up the number of judges here that are going to be, voting, and oh my gosh, if we can just knock out Obamacare. Hello? I mean, you see, they don't get it. They spending all this time and energy, polishing the tumor, reducing the tumor a little bit. Now, it might help. You get rid of Obamacare, you've reduced a little bit of the tumor. Great. But that's not the core of the problem. I mean, in healthcare, the core of the problem, the tumor, is Medicare itself. Okay? Now, that's on the demand side. That's why prices are soaring. And people said this back in the 1960s, that if you adopt Medicare and Medicaid, you're going to have out-of-control healthcare costs. It's been proven correct. And then on the supply side, you've got medical licensure. It's just a protection racket that protects doctors from competition from low-cost healthcare providers. That people that could do things that the doctors, don't necessarily have to be doctors to do, give a flu shot or all those. I mean, you see people now giving flu shots. I mean, there's a whole range of activities that healthcare providers could do. Alternative healthcare, which some people would like to do. I mean, that's their choice, right? I mean, that's what freedom's all about. But it's this licensure it's a protection racket. You see it in the law business. I mean, you've got lawyer licenses. And they say, oh, well, Jacob, we've got to have licensure for lawyers because otherwise there would be incompetent, unethical lawyers out there. What? Are you for real, dude? I mean, hello? Have you not seen the number of unethical, incompetent lawyers out there with licenses? Hello? And the worst part is they lull people into thinking that they're competent and they're ethical because they got the license. I mean, it's just a protection racket. The lawyers don't want their big hourly fees to drop, $300, $500 an hour, with more legal service providers, which is what would happen. Legal costs would go down. They don't want that to happen. It's a little protected cartel. Same with doctors. So you've got Medicare and Medicaid. You got occupational licensure on the supply side. You got all these regulations of insurance companies that preclude insurance companies from, offering services in other states, nationally across state boundaries. Each little state's trying to protect its own little insurance carriers. Uh, that's the tumor, okay? That's what needs to be cut out. Medicare and Medicaid repealed, a total free market in healthcare. Repeal occupational licensure laws. Repeal all these economic regulations on insurance companies and on everybody else too. And then all of a sudden now you've got a total free market in healthcare. It's the secret. I mean, the free market produces the best of everything. And no longer will you see doctors retiring early because they're sick and tired of the mess and the bureaucracy and the Medicare forms and the threats to indict them for fraud and so forth. Now, I'm not saying the doctors necessarily go for this because they're dependent on Medicare and Medicaid. They're dependent on welfare, which is what, we libertarians have said the whole time, is that this is one of the horrors of the welfare state, is that it makes people dependent on it. It's like a narcotic. But that's your solution. So these people that are saying we're fighting Obamacare, fine, okay, you want to fight Obamacare. But let me tell you something, as soon as you get rid of Obamacare, you're back to the crisis again. I mean, why did they enact Obamacare? It was because there's a huge healthcare crisis. You got healthcare costs soaring through the roof and everything. So now you're back to the pre-Obamacare crisis. Now what do you do? And then it's a battle of reforms. Okay, well, the conservatives say, adopt my reform plan, medical IRAs or medical savings accounts and Medicare IRAs and, you know, uh, and then you got the Obama night saying, oh, no, adopt my, it's ridiculous. It's a battle of reforms. I mean, we're going to be back, if you knock out Obamacare, to the situation that gave rise to Obamacare, the crisis, the healthcare crisis. And so then where are you? Well, that's why we've got to, as libertarians, keep talking about the root. To mix a little metaphor here, to pull a weed out, you don't trim the branches. You just pull the whole weed out. And that whole weed is interventionism, socialism, Medicare and Medicaid. They're socialist programs. That's why they exist in Cuba and North Korea and China, because those, and Vietnam, those are socialist countries that have Medicare and Medicaid, and they're very proud of them. And then on the supply side, the licensure side, I mean, they got them in all these socialist countries too. Occupational licensure, get rid of it. In other words, a total free market in healthcare. Now, those of you that are saying, "Oh, Jacob, I mean, I don't want a quack operating on my head to do brain surgery." Well, then why do you go to a quack, man? I mean, maybe that's, maybe there's nothing up there if that's what you would do. You don't need to worry about brain surgery if you ain't got a brain. And if you're going to go to a quack to do your brain surgery, well, then, you don't have anything to operate up there, I mean, people, they lose confidence in themselves when we start talking about a free society. How do you find a brain surgeon today? You don't go and say, well, let me get a list of the doctors that are licensed. You go to your regular doctor and you get referrals and you get recommendations and you look up people that are, have good reputations. A lot of times, you can have an organization like the AMA that's just totally voluntary, recommending who are the good doctors. You can have local, like, good housekeeping seal of approval. I mean, it's sort of like the internet. How do you know which people are best on eBay? Well, there's rankings and there's ratings and there's feedback and so forth. That's the way a market operates, and so that's what we really need to do. We need to like, pull the weed out by its root. We need to excise the cancer totally, and that's the welfare state, regulated economy way of life. Otherwise, it's just crisis and chaos, over and over and over again. And notice that everywhere you look, everywhere the federal government touches something, it's in crisis. I mean, everywhere, the drug war, in crisis. Social Security, busted. There never was a trust fund. There never will be a trust fund. Medicare and Medicaid, crisis. Healthcare, crisis. Immigration, crisis. You've got central planning there. I mean, surprise, surprise. There's all this immigration crisis. I mean, why wouldn't you have a crisis when the government's centrally planning the economy? Education. The president won't even send his kids to public schools in D.C. Crisis, mess, ugliness in government schools. Well, duh, it's central planning. It's a socialist system. in Iraq, Afghanistan, nation building, centrally planned economies there, and centrally planned lives. Uh, is it any wonder that this country's in such a mess? You've got this statist paradigm that's enveloped the founding principles of this country. Now, let me talk a little bit about foreign affairs here. Did you guys see that Detroit bomber, the plane bomber? The guy was going to light his bomb in his underwear, as he was coming into Detroit. That he ends up pleading guilty. Now you're probably thinking, Jacob, you mean pleading guilty before a military tribunal? No, he pled guilty in federal district court. Now you might say, but Jacob, that's impossible. Terrorism is an act of war. It's not a crime. And we all know it's an act of war, Jacob. 9/11 proved that terrorism is an act of war. Well, you better get news to that federal judge in the case, because the federal judge just accepted a plea of guilty from this guy. I think his name is Abdul Bob or something like that. But the federal judge accepted his guilty plea, and that's in a federal district court. Now, what was he doing there? They were prosecuting him. Federal prosecutors were prosecuting him for this attempted terrorist bombing that in principle is no different from 9/11. Nothing. It's a terrorist attack on an airplane. And he's in federal district court. Now, why is he in federal district court? Because a federal grand jury issued an indictment against him. What did they indict him for? Terrorism. Okay? Because you see, terrorism is a crime. It's a federal criminal offense. If you look at the U.S. Code, which is the book that has all the federal crimes in it, like insider trading and excess profits, wherever they put their federal crimes, that's the U.S. Code. And it says terrorism is a crime, or supporting terrorism, and so forth. So there's no question it's a crime. Nobody disputes that. Everybody agrees that terrorism is a crime. What they did was, after 9/11, is they issued a decree, Bush did, and said, I hereby decree that terrorism is not only a crime, it's also an act of war at my option. I get to choose with my military consultants in the Pentagon and the CIA. When I find a guy accused of terrorism, I can do either one. I can treat him as a criminal or a criminal suspect and send him into federal court, or I can treat him as an enemy combatant and try him in the judicial system that the Pentagon is going to set up over at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Now, originally they wanted Guantanamo Bay to be totally independent of any control at all, and by and large, it's independent. It's essentially a dictatorial regime. I mean, okay, the courts, put it in. At first the government was saying, you don't have power over us. You don't have authority. They were telling the federal courts this, that we're an independent fiefdom over here, an independent like little nation state over here in Cuba. And we can do whatever we want in this prison, and there's nothing that can happen to us. And it was a fascinating mindset. And the court said, no, you're under our jurisdiction. This is America. This ain't the Soviet Union. This ain't Red China. You're in the military. That's part of the government. You're now under our control, whether you establish this thing in Cuba or not. But by and large, they run their affairs there. That's why they love it. The military, when people say Obama didn't close, he violated his promise to close Guantanamo, my hunch is because the military told him, you ain't going to close this, Mr. President. This is very important to us. We love it over here. We don't have to worry about the press. We don't have to worry about the Red Cross. We don't have to worry about the courts. By and large, you don't have federal judges going down there and looking at the premises and so forth. And we don't have to worry about Congress, because Congress ain't going to touch us because the CIA is involved in this thing. And so they love it down there at Guantanamo. It's fairly an independent little fiefdom. And they've got their own judicial system that they created. So it's like this weird thing where they say, well, okay, it's a crime if we want it to be a crime. It's an act of war if we want it to be, but it's also a crime because they end up prosecuting it. It's not like they just put people in prison camp as prisoners of war. Like in World War II, let's say they went and captured a bunch of German soldiers. They put them in prison camps. They didn't go and, prosecute them before tribunals, unless they had war crimes or so forth. But with these guys, They put them in Guantanamo, and then they say, well, we're going to prosecute you here. So they've created this alternative, optional judicial system that competes against the constitutional system. And of course, it's totally different. It's a practical matter. People are presumed guilty. They can be tortured. Witnesses can be tortured and brought in. And of course, they never have to have a trial. You know, in the constitutional system, they have a speedy trial requirement. The Constitution requires, but in the military system, no. I mean, these guys have been there years and years and still no trial. I mean, it's the perfect thing. You have the aura of a judicial process saying, well, yeah, people are going to get trials here, but you never bring the trial. It's really ridiculous. But anyway, so this guy pleads guilty in federal district court because they said, well, this one we're going to treat kindly. We're going to be nice to him, and we're going to put him into the federal court system. But they didn't have to do that. I mean, as a result of the post 9/11 decree, they can do whatever they want to this guy. So he pleads guilty, and then he uses the opportunity to tell why he did this. And he points to the U.S. government's actions overseas. That's not what they wanted to hear. They wanted him they wanted to hear, I did it because I hate America for its freedom and values. You see? Because that's what they said after 9/11. That the terrorists struck on 9/11 because they hate us for our freedom and values. No, it doesn't have anything to do with what we've been doing to people in the Middle East. Well, I say we. What the U.S. government's been doing to people in the Middle East. And you know, this is what we've been saying for 10 years, is that what is motivating these people is U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, the invasions, the occupations, the embargoes, the support of dictatorships, the torture partnerships with dictators. I mean, it's on and on and on. I could go down the whole list. And it's clear that when you talk to these people, why they're so angry. It's not because there's churches in America. It's not because there's rock and roll or a new movie out. They're sick and tired of what the U.S. government's doing overseas, including these torture partnerships with dictators and them giving money to dictators and armaments to dictators. I mean, you know, Saddam Hussein's a good example, the Shah of Iran and so forth. And so this guy points to that. And man, you know it's got to drive the state. It's just crazy. I mean, because that's not what they want to hear. Because it confirms what we libertarians have been saying is that this is why we now live under this constant threat of terrorist retaliation because of U.S. foreign policy overseas. The U.S. empire just used 9/11 to continue doing what it had been doing before 9/11. But see, a lot of Americans weren't paying attention. They weren't seeing what the government was doing prior to 9/11. You know, like the sanctions against Iraq. I mean, killing hundreds of thousands of children. Imagine your government killed children. Not just a few, but hundreds of thousands. And when the official spokesman for the U.S. empire was asked, well, do you think the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children is worth it? And she said, sure. You know, it's a tough decision, but yeah, it's worth it. I mean, the anger was palpable in the Middle East. I mean, when the guy that attacked the World Trade Center in '93, when he was asked, why'd you do this? With rage, he pointed to U.S. foreign policy, including what had been done to the children in Iraq with these sanctions. And this is what we've got to confront. Because, you know, it's important to understand motive. Now people say, oh, the state will say, you're blaming America, you're blaming it. No. We're talking about the federal government here, and the federal government is a separate entity from America. I mean, you got the country, and you've got the federal government. I mean, this is borne out in the Bill of Rights. You know, look at the Bill of Rights. It protects the country from the federal government, which is strong evidence that you got two separate entities here. The government is doing things that's hurting our country. It's not just hurting people overseas. It's hurting our country. Because it gets people so angry and so rageful, these occupations, these invasions, the torture partnerships, the kidnappings. It gets people so angry, Guantanamo, the charade that exists there, that they then have this, not all of them, I mean, not all of them are going to just, some of them just take it, but there's a few that just get it in them that I want revenge, I want retaliation, and so then you've got this constant terrorism threat that hangs over our head, the color codes, and then they use that as excuse to take away our freedoms here at home, and they've taken away our freedoms. I mean, let me turn to this Egypt situation. I highly advise you to pay attention to this Egypt thing if you haven't been watching. It's really fascinating because in Egypt, the military, I call it the military commercial complex, but it's like the military industrial complex here. It plays a dominant role in Egyptian society, just like our military here does. I mean, here we've got the military deeply involved in the industry of America. I can't tell you how many businesses are dependent on the military, jobs. I mean, it's integrated all across America. The bases, all the suppliers, the coffee, the soft drinks at the PXs, everything. I mean, the golf courses that have to be maintained. I mean, it's insidious. It's the military plays a dominant role, and well, it's the same thing in Egypt. I mean, but they're they don't have a big overseas empire like the U.S. military does, but they have, like, they run hotels, they run restaurants. They're deeply embedded all through society, and of course the taxpayers are furnishing the money for this huge monstrosity, just like they are here. To support all these bases here domestically and overseas. Well, the Egyptian people, they thought when they got rid of Mubarak, their problems were over. And I wrote at the time, I said, that is not your problem. Mubarak is not your problem. Your problem is your system. It's a systemic problem. You've got a welfare state, you got a warfare state, just like we do here in America. But yours is just, it's sucked so much out of your economy that, you're desperately poor. I mean, unlike, Greece that has just a welfare state, they're like impoverished, they're busted, they're bankrupt. Well, Egypt's pretty much that same way, but they've got this huge military complex like we do here. But so the people are saying, well, we want to form a new government. Well, guess what the military says? The military says, well, when you form your government, that's fine, but it's going to be formed on the foundation of the military. That we come first, and then the government comes second. And the people in the private sector are saying, the protesters are saying, no, it doesn't work that way. That the military is part of the government. When we form the government, we'll tell you whether you're going to exist, in what size, what form, or whatever. The military says, no, you don't get it. That we're necessary for national security. You couldn't survive without the military here, and so we got to protect you from the terrorists. I mean, that's what they're saying. And so you can't dismantle the military. You can't even reduce us because we're in charge. We come first. And one of the most fascinating parts of this is the power that the military has to arrest people without trial. And this is the power that Mubarak had, and it's an emergency power. It came in 30 years ago during an assassination. I mean, yeah, assassination in the news. That was 30 years ago when the president of Egypt was assassinated. They declared an emergency and said, we now have the power to arrest people and keep them in jail without trial and torture them. I mean, these guys are great torturers. Why do you think the U.S. government allied with them and partnered with them to torture people on behalf of the CIA? Yeah, they're good torturers. I mean, they're brutal. They're like the Shah of Iran, which the CIA actually installed and helped train his people to torture and so forth. Well, they've got this power, and all the protesters during Mubarak was saying, we want you to relinquish this power. And it was enacted through the parliament, or whatever they call their legislative body there. Well, the reason this is so interesting is because that's the power that Obama has too. The power to arrest Americans without trial and to detain them and incarcerate them in a military dungeon or a concentration camp, torture them, assassinate them. Those are the powers that the Egyptian people are demanding be relinquished, by having their new parliament rescind them, or just have the military government there just say, renounce them. We're not going to exercise them. The military won't let them go. Why? Terrorism. There's a threat of terrorism. And so, I'm not making this up. They're saying, we are here to stay, we come first, and we will not release this power to arrest people here in Egyptian society without trial because there's an emergency. Its emergencies lasted 30 years. Well, what's fascinating is that here, Government officials won't relinquish their powers either, and their powers came into existence 10 years ago. At 9/11, the power to arrest people without trial, incarcerate them as enemy combatants, yes, in the war on terrorism. In other words, government officials here figured out what Mubarak was doing in Egypt and adopted it here. But what's different is that here the president did it by decree. He didn't go to Congress and say, "I want emergency powers. Enable me to do this," because we've got this emergency, which now has lasted 10 years, and Mubarak's lasted 30 years, and it's going strong. And now you got here. Now here, of course, most Americans are not demanding these powers be surrendered. They're saying, "Hey, we love it that you have the Patriot Act and the enemy combatant doctrine because this is what keeps us safe. This is what keeps us safe." And so they're, unlike the Egyptian people, are saying, "We don't want these government to exercise these omnipotent, totalitarian-like powers." But let's face it, the presidents, even if the American people, 75% said, "We don't want you to have the power to assassinate Americans. We don't want you to have the power to assassinate anyone. We want you to honor the Fifth Amendment. We don't want you to have the power to take Americans into custody and torture them like you did with Jose Padilla and any other American." I don't think they would relinquish it. They did it by decree, and the courts aren't going to get involved here. The courts have already indicated they're not going to get involved. If somebody's on an assassination list of the government, if he tries to come to court, they'll assassinate him on his way to the courthouse. If he gets his father to bring the suit, they'll say he doesn't have standing. And if the guy were to sneak in the courthouse and say, they're trying to assassinate me, all the government's got to do is say, "State secrets and national security, Your Honor," and case is dismissed. I don't know how we get out of this mess except to dismantle the root again, to pull the weed out by its root, excise the whole cancer, the whole idea of empire, of militarism, of all these foreign overseas bases all over America to defend against what? Against the threats that the policies themselves produce? What kind of life is that? I mean, they go out and they stir up these hornets' nests and then say, "Hey, we got to come and, Patriot Act, enemy combatant doctrine, torture, assassination to protect you from the threats that our policies have produced." So that's what we libertarians got to keep doing. We got to keep challenging things at a fundamental level. Because if you can remove the cancer, if you can pull the weed out by its root, then you've got just founding principles of this country. The principles in the Declaration of Independence, fundamental rights. Now, I'm talking about getting rid of the drug war too. I mean, I haven't talked about that tonight, and that's an essential part of this, but it's part of the regulated economy, really. But then you get rid of these cancerous overlays, these tumors, these weeds, and then you've got founding principles, God-given rights, natural rights, the Constitution to protect the exercise of rights, limit government to its proper place, a constitutional republic, a free market society, a society where people are free to accumulate wealth, plan for their own retirement, plan their own charity giving, plan whether to honor their mother and father or not. I mean, this is the kind of society, this is the key. This is the only key to poverty. That's wealth creation. It's the key to prosperity. It's the key to job creation, if that's what your thing is. It's the key to natural harmonies. It's the key to peace with the world, free trade, open borders, free movements of goods and services. I mean, this is the solution. And it's there. It's just, the problem is we grow up under statism and we think, "Oh, no, Jacob, it's just too scary. Freedom is just too scary." Well, what's scary is where we're heading with this statism. On the domestic side, into bankruptcy and moral debauchery. On the warfare side, we're looking at more torture, assassinations, invasions, occupations, Patriot Act, Gitmo. This is not what a free society is all about. That's why libertarians are the only hope for this country. I've said it from the beginning, right? We started FFF. Libertarians are the hope for this country, and it's exciting. That conference I spoke at last weekend, man, it would have charged you up because you can tell that people are learning about libertarianism, and they're coming around. It's exciting. That's the show. I kept you the whole hour. I was going to give you some time off. Anyway, thanks for listening in. Really appreciate it, and I'll talk to you next week. Have a nice rest of the weekend. Bye.